Let me start recording and let me close the PRs. Today, we'll be going through this track right here, rate limiting DDoS and CAPTCHA. That was the third thing I was forgetting about. Rate limiting DDoS protection, what is DDoS and CAPTCHAs. These become useful when you reach a certain scale. So you don't have to worry about them for a long time because if no one's using your website, no one is trying to attack your website. But at some point when you become big, by big I mean if you either raise a funding round, then you will see a lot of these attacks. If you somehow get famous amongst hackers, these people are making money, you will see these attacks come, and then you get approached from someone, hey, we are the ones attacking your website. Please give us $10,000, and else we will keep attacking it. Your users will suffer. So that's when you reach this scale of attacks. We'll understand what are these attacks. We'll understand how do you fix them, the most common ways of fixing them today, and we'll go from there. Okay, that's going to be today's class. Without any further ado, let's get right into it. Let me do a quick poll to begin with. How many of you already know this? Rate limiting, CAPTCHAs, and whatever was the third thing I forgot again. Rate limiting, CAPTCHAs, and DDoS. How many of you already know this? Not a lot of people. I mean 70-30, actually 65-35. So few people do. Again, as I say, the most interesting slide here is exploiting one in production. I would urge you to try this, and if you are able to exploit it anyway, let me know, because this is one of our own websites. But other than that, is going to be fairly teachy stuff. There is a decent bunch of coding, if I'm being honest. I've added some code here. We'll try to implement a service, we'll try to attack the service, we'll try to fix the attack in the service. So it's going to be a combination of coding as well as theory, but you can skip the code because the code is fairly straightforward. Let's get right into it. Why rate limiting? Maybe even before that, what is rate limiting? Sounds like a buzzword, but pretty self-explanatory, right? If you are on a website, if this is your backend of your website, rate limiting could mean you limiting the number of requests that can come out. If there is someone who's sending you a post request and they are sending you this post request again and again in a for loop. If someone, let's say, wrote the code that looks something like this: for let I equal to 0, I less than very big number, I plus plus, axios.get your website.com/API. Anyone can write this code. This is not too difficult to add. I can write this code right now and I can attack a website. I can send them a lot of requests. I can choke their server by sending a lot of requests. Rate limiting, as the name suggests, means you limit the number of requests that can come from a certain IP, a certain user, so that people can't choke your servers. Even if they want to, why would someone want to do this? For fun, to extract money from you. As I said, people do this very often as a company becomes big, to extract some money from you. Because if they are sending so many requests, a real user that's trying to use their service, won't be able to, because the server will be choked. So very common attack vector is to just send a lot of requests to them. So a very common thing to do on your backend code is to rate limit the requests. Now, a lot of times rate limiting happens directly in your Express server, which means at the application level. What do I mean when I say application level? I mean the request does reach your application. It does reach your Node.js server, but you immediately prevent it. You immediately throw it out. That is one way to rate limit. What is another way to rate limit? The code will not even reach your server. The request will get blocked at the load balancer level. Or if you might have heard of API gateways, you make sure the request never reaches your actual Node.js server. It gets prevented even before the request. Firstly, the URL that the user is sending a request to is never your actual server request in this case, or actual server domain in this case. It is some load balancer URL, and you can prevent or rate limit the user here at the load balancer, so that your main Node.js process never even has to receive the request. So these are two ways you can prevent or rate limit a user. We'll be discussing both of them, application level as well as one level above it, by using Cloudflare proxies. Why do you want to do rate limiting again? To prevent overload. Rate limiting controls how often a system can make a request to a service. Mitigating abuse without rate limiting an application could have could be more susceptible to abuse, such as brute force attacks. What is a brute force attacks on passwords? What is a brute force attacks on password? Here I will send a request slash sign in, comma, username harkirat@gmail.com and password, some random password that I'm cycling through in a very long list. Let's say I have a list of common passwords 123 123 123 random 123 4 5 6, and I just cycle through this array and send these requests from this top level array. This is a brute force attack. You are brute forcing all the common passwords that are there to try to be able to sign in from the user. This is another reason you might want rate limiting, so that no one can abuse your service. Number 3, managing traffic in high traffic scenarios like a ticket sale for a popular event. Rate limiting can help manage the load on a server, prevent crashes, ensuring a fair distribution of service like bandwidth and access to purchasing system. Lastly, DDoS protection, which is something we'll get into eventually. The rate limiting doesn't necessarily prevent DDoS protection, so this isn't really a point that should be here, but let's read what it says. It says, a DDoS attack involves overwhelming a site with a flood of traffic from multiple sources. A flood of traffic from not just one server. There isn't a single server that's sending you requests. For example, you could put a server here. When DDoS happens, when distributed denial of service happens, keyword here being distributed, then you bring up 100 servers all around the world, or 100 browsers all around the world, let's say, and send a lot of requests from everywhere. And in this case, rate limiting isn't very effective. You can rate limit based on IPs. You can be like, yaar, theek hai, this IP was sending a lot of requests, or this user from Chandigarh was sending a lot of requests. I will block this user, or I will rate limit this user. But since this is a distributed denial of service attack, you rate limit this guy. This guy is from a different IP sending you request. This guy from a different IP sending you requests. So rate limiting isn't enough to mitigate DDoS. You have to do something extra. We'll come to that eventually. Cool. That's a brief of why you need rate limiting in your application. As your application grows, you should always have strict rate limits. Now, what is the condition of the rate limits? It could be the IP of the user. Here, this IP is sending a lot of requests. Let me block it. This might be why a lot of times in college, you might go to, let's say, check.com. I mean, this happened on my time. Okay. Check.com is a website that a lot of people used to go to get small gigs in college. So if this is the IIT Roorkee campus, and I don't know if you know this, but most campuses, like some whatever college, will proxy your requests from a single server. So it doesn't matter what hostel room you're sending a request from, the world sees a single IP. Doesn't matter if Harkirat is sending a oopsie daisy. Doesn't matter if Harkirat is sending a request from his hostel room, or someone else is sending a request. The world, which means some check.com server, backend server, sees the same IP of this proxy. Let's say this IP is the IIT Roorkee IP. IIT Roorkee has like 3 big IPs. So let's say whatever 10 dot some random IP. So if one user used to overwhelm the check servers, here I want to get this bounty, someone wrote a script, okay, if a request comes, I want to quickly grab it. If this one person started to overwhelm check.com, it got blocked for everyone in the campus. No one in the campus could visit check.com because they had rate limiting on the IP level. So that is the downside of having rate limiting on the IP level. Okay, a lot of times IPs are shared. If I am in my society right now, my neighbor and I might be sharing the same public IP that the world sees. Or especially in colleges, this is very common. You obfuscate the IP or hide the IP of individual users. The world sees the same IP for a user as long as they're inside the IIT Roorkee campus, in the IIT Roorkee network. So rate limiting sort of can be done on the IP level, but as you can see, there is a downside here. So what other conditions can you do rate limiting on? You can do it on user ID level. KR, if Harkirat is the one who's sending a lot of requests, let's rate limit Harkirat. This user ID can no longer send more requests, but let's not rate limit the IP. So another common criteria to rate limit on is user IDs. The most common one is IPs though. All right, cool. common place to add rate limits. Harkiyat, that to means I should rate limit every request of every endpoint of mine, right? Matlab, if I have a backend like this, which has a /API /user /sign up endpoint /API /user /sign in endpoint /API /user /get gigs endpoint / a bunch of these endpoints, should I rate limit all of them, Harkirat? Yes, you should rate limit all of them, but the rate limits shouldn't be very aggressive. The rate limit should something be like, yeah, a single IP can send 100 requests per second or 100 requests per 30 seconds. Seems reasonable. If I go to any website, harkirat.classics.co.in, I'm not sending more than 30 requests in, let's say, a 10-second span. So as long as someone is trying to access your server at this rate, it's fine. They're probably a legitimate user. If the number of requests go above 100 in every 30 seconds, then you should block them. So generally, you should have rate limits. Your application has some set of rate limits for all of the endpoints, but these are very, these are not very aggressive. These aren't only 3 requests per second. These are 100 requests a second per user is fine. Even if someone is sending 100 requests, because if you open the network tab over, you cannot over here, but on a different website, if you open the network tab, there are 30-40 requests that go out initially. If I refresh this page, you will see, a bunch of requests are going out. So it needs to be very lenient rate limit, if at all. There should be. There isn't an if at all, but very lenient. So Harkirat, that is simple. But there should be some endpoints that are very heavily rate limited. I repeat, the whole application should be rate limited at some point. 100 requests for 30 seconds or 100 requests per second is also fine. No one's exploiting your server. They're sending you 100 requests a second. But an endpoint like this, where you're recovering password, let's say I go to harkirat.classics.co.in and I forgot my password. Or if I want to hijack someone else's ID, if I want to hijack my friend's ID who I know has bought the course, what will I do? I'll put their email over here, myfriend@gmail.com. Whatever their email is that I know they've bought the course with. And then I will say, let's say this is my friend. I will say forgot password. I don't own this email, but I will put my friend's email and I will say forgot password. I will say yes, reset email. And an email will go to my friend. Now an email has gone to my friend who has an OTP. What has happened? If this is my friend's Gmail, he just received an email from harkirat.classics.co.in. Okay, your OTP is, let's say this, 200213. I don't know this. My friend knows this. But what can I do? I can send a lot of requests here. Was my OTP 000001? It will say no. Then I will say, was my OTP 000002? It will say no. Was it 3? It will say no. I can keep cycling through them. And if I'm able to write a script that can automate this, I can bombard the server with, whatever, 10 raised power 6 requests. And one of these OTPs will work. OTPs are 6-digit usually. So what I can do is I can, even without knowing the OTP, simulate putting all the OTPs here one by one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to, what will be the last OTP here, 999999. So I can keep overwhelming their server, sending a bunch of requests, and then one of them will succeed. I'll be able to hijack my friend's ID. This is a very sensitive endpoint. This specific endpoint, whatever that endpoint is, which you can see if you click on inspect over here and go through the process again. If I go through the same process one more time, login, put my friend's email, click on forgot password, reset password, and now whatever request I'm sending here with the OTP, I can look at what request that is. Submit. It is this request. It is a request to harkirat.api.classics.co.in/get/OTP verify, this one. So I can write some code, right? This was the request, very long request that's going out. I can put it inside a for loop. For let I equal to 0, I less than axios.get, something like this. You get the idea. But the OTP will keep changing based on I, and then one of these requests will succeed. I'll be able to reset on my friend's password, which means this endpoint should be heavily rate limited. Isme to only 3 requests a second or 4 requests a second, so that even if the person is brute forcing, it takes them years to brute force through all 6-digit passwords. So you have different rate limits for different ones, and the ones that you should definitely have rate limits on are endpoints like these. Wherever you are using 6-digit OTPs, you should have aggressive rate limits. This was the attack that this guy did. I don't know how many of you know Anand Prakash, I think is his name, who is also a very famous bug bounty hunter. And this was the request that he did. As you can see, there are tools that let you brute force. So he put the request in the brute force tool. I think this is Burp Proxy. I could be wrong, but most probably this is Burp Proxy, which is a very famous tool that hackers use. And he put a lot of OTPs there. Okay, there are only 99999 OTPs. He put a lot of OTPs there, and then one of them actually ended up resetting the password for the user. So this was a bounty that he did. And now this is a very common attack vector. Whenever you're pen testing a website, one common attack vector is go to their OTP flow and see how rate limited this endpoint is or it isn't. I think he won like $15,000. This was one of the first ones of his bounties that I saw. And then eventually he created a company, a lot of things, but very common attack vector. Okay? This website had it. I have emails of people reporting, okay, bhai, this specific endpoint is, problematic. You should fix it. And then eventually it was fixed. We will see. We'll try to attack this website today, and we'll see how the attack gets prevented from the backend. Cool. That is a common place to add aggressive rate limits. Generally, you should have rate limits throughout your application. Let's implement a basic reset password flow. I will do a poll and then we will proceed to the site. But let's try to create the functionality for something like this. What are the endpoints that the backend needs to write? And what all requests does it need to accept? Of course, this is one endpoint that we need to write, OTP verify. Another endpoint that we need to write is, the endpoint that actually gets called when you click on reset password and the email goes to the user. Let's try to simulate both of them, write both of them. Let's try to attack them. Let's try to save the attack. So basically, simulate everything we've talked about. Are we good to go? Is this clear? Is this simple stuff or is this slightly hard? This is clear. So let's proceed to writing some code then. Again, there are two endpoints we have to write. So fairly straightforward stuff, but we'll go slow. Let's initialize an empty TypeScript project. Would urge you to do the same if you want to try it out. You can also just look at the code because it's less than 15-20 lines of code. So, even if you don't write it, I'm sure you do understand it, which is what matters. Let me create an empty folder over here. Call it week 20 pen testing. And inside this folder, I will create multiple folders because we have to create the backend. Then we also have to write the script that attacks it. So create multiple folders here. I'm going to create the first one called backend. And then inside this backend folder is where I'll be writing all the backend code that will be vulnerable. Then right next to this backend folder, we'll add another folder that attacks it. Let me open week 20 pen testing in Visual Studio Code. Would urge you to do the same in case you're following along. Totally fine if you're not, because fairly simple stuff. I have a backend folder over here. Let me just introduce the other folder as well. The attack folder. First we'll write the backend code. Then we'll write a script to attack the backend. How do you write the backend code? Done this a few times now. First, initialize a repository inside cd backend, and then npm init-y to initialize a package.json, npxtsc --init. We have done this too many times. I'm not explaining what's happening here. Then update the root dir and the out dir in the tsconfig.json. Root dir, out dir. Then charge your laptop before it dies. All right. What's the next step? Install dependencies. What are we writing? We are writing the backend of an application that lets you reset password. So we want to create an Express server or an HTTP server. So add the right set of dependencies. And then here is some basic code. We can write it ourselves as well, but let's go through it. It's fairly straightforward. The only difficult thing might be this. What is record? We have discussed this in advanced TypeScript, but it's, just a way to describe an object. You can also, write this a different way. If this feels a little jarring to you, this record syntax, you can always write it a different way. Let me show you what the different way is. create a new folder called src, create a new file called index.ts, and here we will be writing all of our code. I've done a few things together, so let me quickly recap. I created a backend folder. I initialized a package.json here by calling npm init-y. This will contain all of our dependencies. Then I initialized tsconfig.json with an outdir and a rootdir, just so that the input source code is in the src folder, the output is in the dist folder. Then I created source/index.ts where I'll be writing all of my code. I can write the code by hand as well. Import express from express and go from there. But we've already written the code, so I'm going to copy it. I can also feel free to choose which one you want to do. But yeah, this has already the code. The thing that I was saying was, if this line seems overwhelming to you, okay, Kirat, what is a record? This is the first time I'm seeing this. Then you can ignore using TypeScript, or you can use a simpler type, something like this. Rather than doing this, you can do this. Both of them sort of mean the same thing for all practical purposes. So feel free to use this if that felt overwhelming. But if this also feels overwhelming, then you need to do a little more TypeScript. Cool. Let me copy the code and bring it here. Then we'll go from there. Let's look at what the code says. Import express from express, const app equal to express, and a port. Assuming this is straightforward, just an import and initializing the express application. App.use express.json, because we will be sending some JSON data in there. You need this middleware to be able to parse that JSON data. If you're sending JSON data in a post request in body, this is needed to be able to parse it. We are maintaining an in-memory store. We are not creating a database. We can, if need be, and we can create a database and put the OTP requests there, or store the user's OTP there. We're just putting it in memory for now because this is just to simulate such an environment. A post request to /generate OTP. This is the request that will go out whenever the user generates an OTP, which means whenever the user is here, clicks on login, puts their email, clicks on next. When this forget password they click on, when they click on this and they click on reset password, when they click on this button, the request that goes out, that actually emails the OTP to them, that generates the OTP and stores it in a database, that request is this generate OTP request. And the other request that we have is the reset password request, which the user sends when they try to reset password, or basically this request that goes out on the second submit. Only in our case, we take the OTP as well as the new password from the user. Apex or this website seems to have two stages. Okay, you first put the OTP, a request goes out, then you put your new password. We will put everything in a single request. So let's look at the contents of the request. Fairly simple. We take the email from the user itself. Kirat, this seems unsafe. No, this is not unsafe, right? I can put anyone's email over here. It's not like I'm restricted on putting my own email. You can do forget password. You can go to Facebook and do forget password for any random email that you want. So this email can be taken as an input from the user. There is no security vulnerability here. You don't need to extract it from a cookie. This isn't an authenticated request. I am logged out over here. As you can see, I see sign up, sign in, which means I am logged out. Yet I can send this request for any random email. So this input can be extracted from the email and sent out in the email, in the input. The email can be sent out in the input. If there is no email, we send them a 400 status code. If there is an email, then we generate a random OTP. This code generates a random number between 0 to 999999. Very straightforward. If you don't understand it, feel free to put it in ChatGPT. But in fact, this code will make sure the 6-digit code is between this to 99999. You get the idea. So you get a 6-digit code in this OTP variable. You store it not in a database, but just in memory for now. And then you log it on the screen. We don't actually send out an email to the user. Ideally, you should send an email here. All right. I'm hoping it's straightforward. It is a generate OTP endpoint that takes an email as an input, generates a random OTP, stores it in memory because it needs to later validate it as well. If when the user actually sends the OTP along with the new password, so stores it in memory, logs it, and then lets the user know OTP has been generated. Please check your email. Of course, we're not sending an email right now, but ideally you should have some logic here to send the OTP to the user on email as well. That's the first endpoint. What is the second endpoint? And for our convenience, we're also logging it on screen so that we can get it in the log and try to exploit the second endpoint. But even if you don't log it, we are attackers. We don't anyways have the password. We will try to attack the second endpoint, and hence even if we don't log it, it's fine. We will be able to attack the second endpoint and randomly generate an OTP. The second endpoint is what the attacker will hit with the bunch of random OTPs. Is your OTP 10000? Oh no, is it this? Is it this? So on and so forth. This will be brute forced by the attacker. And what does it do? It takes the email, the OTP, and the new password as an input. This user had tried to reset their password, had tried to send this request. This is their OTP and this is their new password that they want to reset on their account. If either one of these does not exist, you return them a 400 status code. If all three exist, you check, is the OTP correct? Is the OTP the same OTP that was used to generate this specific user's OTP when they wanted to reset their password? And if the answer is yes, then you're good to go. You can reset their password in the database. Of course, we're not doing that here because there is no database, but you get the idea. Here you will write the logic to actually reset their password, and then feel free to delete it from the store because the password has been reset, and you let them know your password has been reset successfully. If not, you tell them invalid password. If I start this application and tsc-b2, compile the code, and node dist/index.js to start the code, it starts on localhost /3000. Let me try to hit these endpoints as I normally would, as a normal user, not as an attacker. What is the first endpoint I would hit? Ideally, I would hit them, of course, in a UI, but since we're testing it, what is the first endpoint I will hit? Localhost /3000 / generate OTP. I want to generate an OTP on my account. What is the body that I will send? This is the email that I want to generate an OTP on. If I send this request, the body that I get back is OTP generated and logged. In the real world, it would go somewhere as well. We have just logged it. In the real world, I would go to my email, I would get the OTP, and what would I do next? Let's see what the logged OTP is. It is 700167. So let me copy this. What is the second request that I will send out from the UI? It will be /reset-password. This will be the second request that I send out with my OTP and the new password. Reset-password. With this is the OTP that was logged. In the real world would be emailed, but right now was logged. And this is the new password that I want to send. If I send the request, it says password has been reset successfully. If I send the wrong OTP over here, then it will say invalid OTP. Do we understand the backend? I'm assuming it's simple, but if you have not done Express at all, then it might be a little difficult. So let me do a quick poll before I proceed to writing the attacker logic. But do we understand the backend logic? How would you create the two endpoints in a dummy fashion? We're not putting things in the database. We're not doing a bunch of things we're supposed to do because this isn't a real application, but you get the idea. Great. 92% is beautiful. So let's write the attacker logic then. We already know the endpoint to hit. We already are JavaScript developers. We can write some logic that looks like this. For let I equal to 0, I less than, whatever, some big 6-digit number, I++, axios.get or whatever, axios.post. This shouldn't be too difficult to add. So would urge you to write it yourself. Given you have, this service running, let's say, on localhost /3000. Can you write this logic in the next 8 minutes yourself? Or maybe next 7 minutes now, yourself to attack this specific server and brute force reset password and reset the password for it. Try it out. What is OTP store here? So everyone try it out, write it yourself. The second folder that I created here, attack, try to create a Node.js process, Golang process, doesn't matter. Your choice. Language is your choice, whatever language you want to write it in, but try to attack this backend. Does it change the OTP for every single person? Yes, it is a random OTP that is generated for every generate OTP request. So every user will have their own request. What is OTP store? It is a place where we are caching. This email had this OTP. We have just generated this OTP for this email so that whenever the second request comes, we are able to check कि is user ka OTP yahi tha na? For this user, was this the OTP that I had generated? The OTP that they are sending. That is why you need OTP store, a place where you are storing all the OTPs given the emails. If you've done medium assignment, you should be good to go. Any more questions in Q&A? Let me summarize everything I've done until now, and then we will proceed. For everyone who understands everything, write the attack logic, and I will also write it in 3 more minutes. So for the next 3 minutes, try to write the attack logic. There are some hints in the slides. To quickly recap what we have done since the beginning, we introduced rate limiting. Why do you need to put limits on users, specifically how many requests they can send? If this is your backend, you should be protecting your backend code. This is your backend code. You should be protecting it so that a single user cannot send you more than 100 requests a second, let's say, or 50 requests a second. And if they do, you should be blocking them. That is what rate limiting means. Then we discussed a common use case of aggressive rate limits. Whenever you are trying to regenerate OTP, this can be brute forced. Someone can come and put a random OTP here, 000001, and click on submit. If that doesn't work, then they will put 000002, and then they will submit, so on and so forth. This is an endpoint that can be brute forced. So you want to have aggressive rate limits here. You want to rate limit the user aggressively, कि भाई only 1 request a second, or 1 request a minute, or 1 request every 30 seconds, something like that. Then we implemented the backend for this. This is going to be a simulated backend. This is the code for it. An endpoint to generate OTP. This endpoint gets hit from this page when the user clicks on reset password. And then another endpoint to reset password when the user says, I want to reset password. Here is my OTP. Here is my new password. This we have written. This we have started locally as well. As you can see, it's running on my machine. This we have tested in Postman as well. Okay, it works. If I send a wrong OTP, it says invalid OTP. If I send a right OTP, it says changed. That is all we've done until now. 1 more minute, and then I will write the attacker code. And if you write the attacker code, try attacking a few websites afterwards. Smaller websites, What do I mean by smaller website? Project your friend might have made. Any place where there is 6-digit OTP logic, you can try to attack. The attack that Anand also did was on a beta endpoint of Facebook. So Facebook was trying to introduce a new endpoint, some beta.api.facebook.com, where he found an endpoint which was vulnerable in this specific scenario, that he brute forced the OTPs and was able to reset password on other people's account. So yeah, try to find that endpoint. Cool. 7:37, almost there. Let me start to write the code as well. Steps are here in the next slide, which is called exploiting the endpoint. Let me give you a quick Postman hack in case you want it. You don't need it today, but you might need it eventually when we exploit a production application. Whenever you've written some code in Postman, right? I want to send a post request with this body to this endpoint. You can export that request in Node.js, Golang, your language of choice. If you click on this button right here. If you are in Postman, click on this button and it will let you export the request in whatever language you want. In my case, I want to attack using Node.js. So I click on Node.js Axios and it gives me all the code that can be used to send out the same request. Now I can write this myself as well. It's not too difficult. Axios.post localhost:3000/reset password, and then this body. It actually has a bunch of extra headers that we don't need. So it's like too fluffed out of a code. But when we hit a production website, it will be very hard for us to keep track of all the body that's being sent out, all the headers that are being sent out. So it's a good idea. Whenever you're hitting a production website, copy their request, bring it to Postman, and export it from Postman to Node.js, and then use it in your script. So I'm going to just copy all of this code and build on top of this. You can write it from scratch as well, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to reuse a lot of this. This becomes super helpful. Once I got access to someone's Razorpay, I'm not going to say who, but another educator's Razorpay account. And then I hit a specific Razorpay endpoint. If I give me the last 10 purchases, I got their last 10 purchases. Then I hit it from Postman, got their 10 purchases, because Razorpay limits, you can only get like 10 purchases at a time. I copied the code from here, wrote a for loop, and exported all their purchases for the last 1 year. Then I realized, man, itna paisa hai coding mein, because I was able to see all their purchases, right? So that is another, another place where this becomes very useful. Okay, if you can only hit a paginated endpoint with 10 sort of requests at a time, then you can get that request here, export it out from here, and then loop over it. Cool. Let me copy this code. Let me open Visual Studio Code and let me try to attack it. cd attack. What is the first thing you do? npm init-y to initialize a package.json over here. npx tsc --init to initialize a tsconfig.json. Change the root dir to /source. Change the out dir to /dist. And then create a src folder index.ts. Straightforward. Not going to repeat this. Now paste everything that Postman gave you. Postman literally gave you the code to hit one endpoint. Paste it here. Of course, it will say Axios is not there. So you will have to install Axios by doing npm install Axios. And since I'm using TypeScript, I have to replace the require with an import Axios from Axios. And now I have all the code to hit the endpoint. Now this is a little too verbose of a code. I don't need a lot of these headers, but let's keep them. You can, very easily write this code yourself. It actually should be very simple. Axios.get or whatever, Axios.post 3000, and then the body has the email, OTP, so on and so forth. So this much is good enough. This is a little too verbose. It has a bunch of extra things, but we will just try to reuse it. This is the thing that finally sends the request. Harkirat, Axios.request. ये तो मैं पहली बारी देख रहा हूँ. This is the first time I'm seeing this. I have seen Axios.post. I've seen Axios.get. What is Axios.request? It's another way to send a request where all the parameters exist here in the config variable. So the method post, headers are these, body is this. That's how these guys export it. Feels jarring, you can choose Node.js native over here. It will give you how to send a request using fetch as well, even though, I don't know, this seems a little too difficult. Axios is the easiest. And as I said, you can actually get rid of a bunch of these headers. It will still work. The question is, how can I for loopify it? How can I put it inside a for loop? And the answer is pretty simple, right? If this is the code that sends a single request, why not put it inside a function? Async function send request with an OTP. As an input, and then just replace the OTP over here with whatever your input is. I have created a function called send request, and now I can just call it inside a for loop again and again. Send request for 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So that is how you I'm assuming this is straightforward. Just took the code and put it inside a for loop. Again, you can also replace all of this with something like this. Axios.post localhost colon 3000, and then body will have OTP that will come from arguments, and then email will be whatever your hard-coded email was, and so on and so forth. So if you want to keep it clean, keep it clean. If you want to copy from Postman, because we will eventually have to copy from Postman when we are hitting a production website, so feel free to use the code that Postman gives you. Just put it in a function so that it's a generic request now where you can keep changing the OTP. Let's try to send this request with some random OTP. Let's see what we get back. I would also do one more thing here. I would not do a axios.request.then. I would await it. I would await the axios.request rather than, whatever the thing that Postman gave me, because when you're sending these many requests, you should batch them. You should send 200 at a time, 300 at a time, not everyone together. So you need to await this, so you know that the first 100 requests have happened. Then you'll send the next 100 requests. Then you'll send the next 100 requests, so on and so forth. Cool. So that is why I'm awaiting this here. That's the only extra thing I've added. Everything else I've copied from Postman. Let's try to call it. Let's do a send request 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me send a request with a random OTP. Is my backend running? Don't think it is it? It isn't. So let me start the backend, node this/index.js. Let me try generating an OTP by sending the request to reset password with this specific email. Generate OTP with this specific email. An OTP has been generated and logged. If I look at it, the OTP is 350317. I can send a request with this OTP and that should reset my password. Let's see if that happens. Let me compile the attack code and run it. And it says password for this has been reset to 123123, which means I can now programmatically send this request. Why not put it inside a for loop? For let I equal to 0, I less than equal to 999. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see it probably. Basically something like this, 999, 999, I plus plus, and then send request with I dot toString. You can do this. This is almost right. There is nothing really wrong in it, other than the fact that you are sending a lot of requests. You are sending 100,000 requests together, or whatever, a million requests together, which can cause issues, especially if you're hitting a production endpoint. It might work locally. If you hit from here to here, it's fine. It might just work. But when you're doing the same thing, not in production on a website, this will not work. So usually you should batch the requests. What do I mean by batching the requests? What is the other extreme? Other extreme is here I will await every request. This is also bad. How can you await every request? Then you're sending one request with OTP 1, then waiting for the response, then sending the second request, then waiting for the response. This is also not great. Send 100 at a time, then wait for 100 to succeed, then send the next 100, so on and so forth. How can you write batching logic like this? This is slightly hard to write in TypeScript, so you will have to bear with me. Even this works. So let's first make this run and then we'll add batching to it. If you don't understand batching, you might have to, understand some extra code that we write here. But first let's bombard all the requests. It's fine. Let me regenerate an OTP here. It says OTP generated and logged. The OTP is 392361. I am not hard coding the OTP here. I am bombarding the server with every OTP inside this for loop. Let's see if it does it. tsc-b node this/index.js. Hopefully it's sending requests. It's just sending too many. Let's see what happens. I did not try it. Maybe it does not work without batching and we have to add batching. We'll see. Taking a really long time. Let me log where we are at. So let's do a console.log. All right, that's fairly slow. What was the OTP? 393261. Yeah, it will take some time for it to happen. We can talk until then. How was your day? Almost there. Again, this will not work in a production website. If you try to hit a production website without any batching, you're sending out all the requests. Oh, fucking A. See, it became very slow. Even locally and on production, there you go. some error came out. So let's batch it out. Makes sense. It ran out of memory. Let's batch it and send it in 100 request chunks. Yeah, first 100 requests will go, succeed. The next 100 requests will go, so on and so forth. How can you do it? If you know DSA and algorithm, then this should be straightforward. You can do this. For I equal to 0, I less than 999, I plus equal to 100, which means sending 100 at a time. For let j equal to 0, j less than 100, j plus plus. Send request for I plus j to string. So first you will send requests for 1 to 100, then you'll send from 100 to 200, then 200 to 300, so on and so forth. The only other thing here is this is an async request. So you have to wait for all 100 to happen before you proceed and do the next iteration over here. So what you have to do here is something called, if you use the promise.all API, which you totally couldn't have, and it is fine. I will try to explain it, but it will be a little hard, so bear with me. I will create an in-memory variable called promises. Const p equal to an empty array. Okay? In every iteration that is happening where we have to send 100 requests, I create a variable called p, and yahan pe I do p.push send request. Harkirat, p.push send request so doesn't return anything. If you go to send request, this is an async function. Doesn't really return anything, and may thodi likha return 0. Why are you doing p.push, Harkirat? This though will always be undefined. No. Let's try to log p. Console.log p. Let's see in every iteration, what does p amount to? It will have 100 values. I hope you understand that, because we're running this inner for loop 100 times. But what is in this p? ये कहाँ से प्रिंट हो रहा है? Oh. What am I missing? I'm sure someone knows. Oh, okay, my bad. J++. Now let's try that one more time. I did a I++ here. What gets logged? An array with 100 pending promises gets logged. Okay, it might feel like this doesn't return anything since this is an async function, but if you ever have an async function where you are awaiting, it returns a promise to you. It returns something that you can await upon. You would have done this, right? What was the other approach? Ki yaar Harkirat, I will do this. I will do a await over here. Anytime there is a request that's going out, I will await that request before sending out the next request. The problem with this approach would be, okay, you're sequentially sending the request. First request ka wait kiya, then the second request, then the third request. What we have to do is batching, where this becomes a little tricky. The final code, the thing that you have to await upon is promise.all p. What does this mean? This is capital P. Notice this is capital P promise. This is like something JavaScript gives you. The same thing you might have done if you've created your own promises. Promise.all p says here all the function calls that happened, let them go out parallelly. When all of them succeed parallelly is when this await will succeed and you can move on to the next iteration. I repeat, what are we doing? Const p equal to empty array. P.push 100 requests. This iteration runs 100 times. We are pushing 100 promises to P, and then we're awaiting all 100 of them. Okay, when all the 100 requests succeed is when we will move on to the next 100 requests. And then when all of them succeed, then we'll move on to the next 100, so on and so forth. That is how you do batching in an async request. This could totally be very difficult, which is why I will do a poll very soon. But let me first put it inside an async function and then call the async function. And let me try to see if this works. Then I will do a poll after this. To quickly recap, what am I doing? When I call the main function, I iterate over all the OTPs, but now I'm sending 100 at a time. First the OTP 0 to 100 will go, then 100 to 200, then 200 to 300, so on and so forth. I'm not sending all of them together because when we tried sending all of them together, our process ran out of memory. Let's see if this works. tsc-v node-index.js returns a very big error. We should put this inside a try catch because the backend returns you a 400 status code if you send the wrong OTP. So the process will crash over here, which is why you need to either put this inside a try catch or, you could have put this inside a try catch. Either one would have been fine. Let's see if this works. Oh my God. Let's not log the exception over here. And let's log where we are at, console.log I plus j. Let's see what 100 requests we are sending out again and again. So now let me compile. Run. And now as you can see, I'm sending 100 requests at a time. And I've sent 21,600 to 21,700 together. Then I moved on to 21,700 to 21,799. Then I moved on to 21,800, 21,899, so on and so forth. So that I don't have 100,000 pending requests because each request takes some memory. If I have so many pending requests, then my Node.js process will run out of memory, which is why I'm batch sending them. Let's see if this works. What was our generated OTP? It was 393261. So when it reaches that stage, hopefully that one OTP is able to, attack the server. Again, we have to do some small talk. How's the weather in wherever you're at? Almost there. There you go. Password for this has been reset. Amongst all the requests that I'm sending out, one of them hit the right spot. One of them had the right OTP, was able to reset the password for this email, even though this person doesn't even know the OTP. Do we understand? Maybe other than batching, do we understand everything? Maybe batching also we understand, I don't know. But let's do the first poll because iske baad we'll be hitting a production website. The next thing we'll do is same steps but for a prod website that's running. Do we understand this? We understand this. Great, 90%. Great, pretty good actually. So then 7:56. Might have to, should take a break maybe. I'm happy to continue by the way. So do you want a break? Yes or no? No? Great. Love it. Let's proceed. Let's hit a production website next. The website that we're hitting is slide number 5. The same website that I showed you. This classics website. Let's try to reset someone else's password. Let's not do it together. Maybe you can actually. This is good. This will be a good test of how robust the systems are here. Hai na? So let's try to exploit the same bug here and let's see if we're able to or not. Steps remain the same. Only thing is we need to find that endpoint that gets hit. How can we find that endpoint? Login. Forgot password. If you are trying this, try it on your own email. Don't try it on mine. What if there is a bug and then you get access to my email? Click on forgot password. Click on reset password. Now, whenever I click on submit, the request that goes out, I need the exact structure of that request. Is it a GET request? Is it a PORT request? What endpoint is it on? What body does it send? So on and so forth. How can we do it? You can go to the network tab. Now this website blocks the network tab. If I right click, it's not letting me right click. So how can you bypass that? Open a new tab. First open the network tab and then go to this website. And if you do see something like this, a debugger paused somewhere, then click on this icon right here and then proceed from the debugger. You might see this. Seems like I don't know. Maybe you don't see it. If you do, make sure you release the breakpoints and click on the next arrow. Click on login. Put a random email. Forgot password. Reset password. Email has been sent out. Now, let me click on submit. with some random OTP 999999. Submit. And I was able to get the exact request. What is the request? It goes to harkirath.classix.co.in/get/OTP verify. Some, get request with somebody. I don't care. I don't have the mental capacity to look at every request, every header that's going out. So what will I do? How can I copy over this complete request? You can right click on copy and click on copy as curl. Curl is another popular way to send backend requests. Just like Axios say you can send requests. If you select copy as curl, curl is just something you can run in bash to send out requests. So if I right click and click on copy as curl, you will see if I go to my terminal, I can paste the curl contents here. They look something like this. It says, it's selected for some reason, but curl space, the actual endpoint that I'm hitting, space, these are all the headers that I'm sending. That's pretty much it. Seems like it only sends headers and query parameters. If I press enter, it's similar to, sending the request, but from the terminal now. And it says OTP is invalid, status 203. So I can send requests like this now. Rather than sending a request from here, I can send it from my terminal. I can also import this into Postman. So what can I do? Right click, copy as curl. Make sure you're copying the right request if you're trying this with me. Go to Postman, click on import, paste the curl over here. And you should see get, and then this, everything is populated for you. Okay, this is the request that was going out. These are the headers that were going out. This is the body that was going out. These are the query parameters. Everything is here. You can click on send. It will tell you OTP is invalid. If it does not work for you, you might have copied the request above it. Make sure you're copying the actual request, not the pre-flight request that's right above it. Make sure it doesn't have options over here. It has get over here. Copy this request. Copy as curl, the one that's below, and then import, paste it over here. And now as you can see, it says options. So, you might have copied the wrong one. I just copied the wrong one. Let me recopy the right one. There you go. And sending it works. What's the next step? Can you guess? It's exporting this in Node.js, because I will be exploiting their server via a Node.js process. So let me copy this Axios code and bring it to my original attacker script. This is my attacker script that I had written. Right now I was sending a request to my backend, my localhost backend where I was trying this out. Now I will send this request where? To the ClassX server. I will try to exploit the ClassX server. I'll send a bunch of requests there. So paste this over here. The config as well as axios.request. Put a await over here. So this is the request that now I will send. As you can see, it is a get request that goes here. Harkirath, why is this a get request? That their developers know. This should be a post request ideally. You're sending in some data, but their developers have written it this way. Their developers have written it this way. The only thing that changes here is the OTP. So I need to make the OTP dynamic. And now this function that I had written will loop over all the OTPs and send them requests in batches of 100. Can I exploit it? Seems like it. Could this have worked if you did this 6 months ago? Yes, it did. Rate limiting was added very recently in ClassX. It was on a Saturday, if you remember, where our servers also went down because they added rate limiting everywhere and we were hitting them very often. I don't know if you remember, but they added rate limiting very recently. Now this endpoint is fairly rate limited. If I try to hit them, tsc-b node disk/index.js. Let me put this inside a try catch. And try that one more time. As you can see, now it's slower. Why is it slower? Because it's hitting a production, it's hitting it over the internet. It's not hitting on localhost 3000, which is why it's slightly slower. But seems like you're able to exploit it. No. They have blocked me. Harkirath, how do you know you have been blocked? If I log a response here, you will see it says blocked. Another way for me to test it is, if I go to Postman and send the request now, it says try after 60 seconds. They have rate limited my IP. Doesn't matter if I now send them a request from here or send them a request from here. They have rate limited my IP. I cannot hit their servers for the next 60 seconds. For the next 60 seconds, I've been rate limited. This is how you protect sensitive endpoints in production. This specific endpoint should be heavily rate limited. General endpoints can be, slightly more lenient when it comes to rate limiting. But do you understand how the folks at ClassX have now, backed me off for the next 60 seconds? Of course, this will work after 60 seconds, but now it will take me days to reset password via this method, because every 5 requests I send, they will rate limit me. Then I have to wait 60 seconds. Then another 5 requests I send, they will rate limit me. So amongst the million OTPs that I have to send, it will take me days to use this method. So do we understand this? Do we understand how we can test this on production websites now? Will you go out next and try to hit a bunch of websites? You might find a bug, may win some bounty. This is a very low severity-ish bounty, as in most developers already know this. When this happened on ClassX, I told them, they said, yes, we know this. Took them a long time. They finally rate limited when they got DDoSed. Then they added rate limiting everywhere, including to this endpoint. But very ignored sort of a vulnerability. There's a good chance you don't get paid anything. Either way, let's proceed then. If we understand how to attack a production website, let's understand how can you save this endpoint. How they might have saved their endpoint. How can we save ours? And this is actually fairly straightforward. If you want to do IP-based rate limiting, you can use a library. You can also do it by hand. Whenever someone sends you a request, whenever you get an app if this is your backend server, you can always extract the IP of the user from the request, and you can have an in-memory variable const user sent requests in last 60 seconds, whatever, which stores all the requests this user has sent in the last 60 seconds. You can get the IP, const IP equal to rec dot, whatever is the way to extract IP here. And then you can do, this thing of user IP plus if this thing of user IP is, whatever, greater than some 100 requests, then you just return right here, too many requests. So you can write this yourself. You don't necessarily have to depend on an external library, but external libraries give you 10 different things. So it's just easier to use them. Which one are we using? Again, feel free to use any. The one that we're using is express rate limit, which is pretty simple. You create a limiter, const limiter equal to rate limiter, which is something they provide you. And you provided KR in this window of 15 minutes, limit it to 100 requests. Only 100 requests should be allowed to be sent by a user in 15 minutes. If they sent more than them, back them off. Tell them to wait for 15 more minutes. And then if you do a app.use limiter, then this will be applied to all the endpoints. If you want to apply it to certain endpoints, then you can create multiple limiters, one with a more aggressive limit, one with a slightly less aggressive limit, and then use them the way we used middlewares until now. Let's see what that looks like in the code, but it's actually fairly straightforward. Let me copy this code. This is now the updated code of our backend. Original code had no rate limiting, had a generate OTP endpoint, reset password endpoint, which was not rate limited. If I paste the new code, number one, I have to introduce the express rate limit library. So let me do that. Introduce it in the wrong folder. I need to introduce it in the backend folder. So cd.cd backend, npm I express rate limit. There we go. And what do? I create two rate limiters. OTP rate limiter for the person who's trying to generate an OTP. And this one is should be more lenient. 3 is also fine. It doesn't matter. Depends on what your limits are. Here it says only 3 times you should be allowed to open or hit this specific endpoint in a window of 5 minutes. And what is the other one? It is you can max send 5 requests in a 15-minute window whenever you're trying to reset the password. How can I use this first OTP limiter here? I have passed it as one of the middleware callbacks. If you remember, whenever you create a middleware, you can either do this app.use, whatever your middleware is, password rate limiter. Then this will be applied to all the endpoints. Or if you want to apply them to some specific endpoints, you can be like, generate OTP mein OTP limiter lagega. Reset password mein this specific rate limits will be used, so on and so forth. And what were middlewares? Before your actual request happens, they run some logic and either block the request or let it flow. So that is why a middleware makes the most sense to handle rate limiting over here. Even if you write your own rate limiting logic, you should create it in a separate middleware. Let's see if this works as expected. Let me compile the code. Let me rerun the code. And now let me first generate an OTP. Let me try to generate too many OTPs. If I send the generate OTP request once, twice, thrice, fourth time, it says too many requests. There were only 3 requests allowed every 5 minutes. So I can only generate it 3 times. What is the last password that got logged? It is this 751091. But as an attacker, I don't know the password. I will just send them a lot of requests. So if I now go back to the attacker code, and if I update the attacker code to go back to hitting the local endpoint and not class X, the code that we had originally written. Let me quickly revert. There we go. This is the code that we had originally written. Let me try to bombard my localhost endpoint, and as you expect, it'll just get rate limited, so you won't be able to attack it. Node /index.js. It's trying to send a lot of requests, but the response that it's getting back is mostly something that looks like this, which reset password. Too many password reset attempts. Please try again after 15 minutes. Cool. That is how you rate limit endpoints, and aggressively rate limit them, especially in cases like these where you're resetting password and someone can brute force your password. Do we understand this? Can we proceed? Iske baad it's DDoS, because what we've done is not enough to prevent a DDoS. So what is DDoS? How do you prevent a DDoS? Is what we'll be doing next. Alrighty. Let's proceed to DDoS attacks, which are another common attack if you want to ever make money as a hacker. The problem with our approach is your server is still vulnerable to distributed denial of service attacks. This is Harkirat's machine. Harkirat tried to hit class X. Class X rate limited Harkirat. But if all of us, let's say there are currently 800 people on the call. If all of us from 800 IPs send them requests and all of us are around, let's say, allowed 100 requests, then we can brute force 800k or a million OTPs, right? So they can't prevent a distributed attack. They can prevent, they can. What they will do is, whenever an OTP is generated, they will be like, whenever an OTP is generated, you can at max have 3 tries. Try 1, try 2, try 3. If you're not able to do it in 3 tries, this OTP expires. So they can actually do a few things to prevent this without worrying about DDoS. And DDoS is not for cases like these. Distributed denial of service is for something else. The name itself has distributed denial of service. Key thing to notice, both distributed and denial of service. What is the purpose of these attacks? When someone is attacking you like this, it is to deny service to your other users. It is to choke your server so much that other people won't be able to hit it. When have I seen this in production? I have seen this in production during an NFT mint. What is an NFT mint? NFT mint is when people are buying an NFT for the first time, or sneaker drops if you've heard of them. These are the 2 examples I've written here. How can you? Why do attackers do this thing? On a sneaker drop event, when a sneaker is coming out for 20,000 rupees, but its price is going to be 1 lakh rupees right after you buy it, and there is a limited supply, you will try to block everyone. I will hit their backend so hard that no one will be able to buy, so that I send in one request. One of my requests will work, but everyone, real customers that are trying to mint an NFT or real customers that are trying to buy the sneaker will be blocked. That is one reason when DDoS is done. 2, whenever there is a limited supply of something, let's say there is a premiere of a movie that's coming out and it's going to black market, it's going to be very good. IPL seats are going on for the World Cup between India and Pakistan. Then you will see people do DDoS. If I try to create a for loop to buy the IPL match ticket, then I will get rate limited. But if I do it from 1,000 servers throughout the world, then they can't block me because they don't know my IP. They don't know that I'm sending requests from so many places. That is what distributed denial of service is. Usually it's for denial of service. You take their server down, you choke them. Even if they have rate limiting, you choke them from everywhere to charge ransom because their service remains down. You can choke their server and then email them we have choked your server. Please give us $10,000 in crypto, and only then we will relieve our DDoS. So, common attack vector, very common or easy to fix as well. Like nothing too out of the ordinary to fix here. But for the people who don't know what DDoS is, you can fool them. Okay, yeah, we have hacked your server, and your server is down. So, give us $20,000 only, then you'll fix it. But generally, whenever you see attacks like these, it's a DDoS that's happening. How does a DDoS happens is super interesting. How does someone have access to so many machines all around the world? How can someone have access to thousands of machines? And this is where a lot of ransomware comes in. A lot of times, when you have ransomware, malware in your machine, in your EC2 instances all around the world, one common use case of putting that small software in your machine is whenever they need to do a DDoS, they will start sending requests from your machine as well. So that, there are a lot of legitimate users that are trying to visit that specific server. Cool. That's what DDoS is. How do you prevent them? There are two ways of... CAPTCHAs aren't really a way to prevent DDoS, if I'm being honest. Let's go to the last slide, actually. The way to prevent DDoS is, have you seen this page that when you visit a website? This happens on TopTal very often for me. I don't know if it'll happen. So if you go to toptal.com, if everyone visits toptal.com right now, some of you might see this page first that says checking your browser before accessing... this screenshot I took from Google. This is not mine. But checking your browser before accessing whatever website takes some time. Protected DDoS protection by Cloudflare. Have you seen this? That's all you have to do. You can flip a setting. You can proxy your request. You can be like, KR, if this is my domain name, let's say, app.100xdevs.com, and this is my EC2 machine where it is deployed. And then there are some really smart people at Cloudflare who have figured out how to do DDoS prevention. You proxy your requests via Cloudflare over to your, EC2 machine. So any request that's coming is not directly coming to your EC2 machine. It's going via Cloudflare, and Cloudflare is figuring out, is this a legitimate request or is this coming through a DDoS farm, and it's preventing it right here. That is why you see pages like these, which are checking, are you a legitimate user or not? If not, they'll block you right here. Cloudflare will block you right here. It won't let you, let the request reach your EC2 server. That's the easiest way to get rid of DDoS. Cloudflare is sort of one of the biggest players in this market. If you go to cloudflare.com, the very first thing you see here is under attack, because this was their biggest offering to begin with. DDoS prevention. Eventually, now they're a cloud provider only, but CDNs and DDoS was their biggest offering. And this is a popular one. AWS gives you something called, I forgot the name, some shield. GCP gives you WAF. There are ways to, like other clouds also provide you this, but Cloudflare is the one I've seen most popularly. So how do you do this? It's actually fairly straightforward. If you want to do this, I think there is no other way of doing this unless you bring your domain name to Cloudflare. I repeat, I buy my domains from wherever, GoDaddy.com, GoogleDomains.com, this 10kdevs.com I had bought on Google Domains, but I had to transfer it over to my Cloudflare account. You can see it here now, to be able to use DDoS. I don't think they allow DDoS prevention unless they own the domain name. They also cannot, because if I'm in Google Domains here and I put, my EC2 address here, okay, chess.10kdevs.com points here, then this request will go directly here. It will never, you never told ke bhai, this request needs to go to Cloudflare, which will proxy it to this IP, right? Which might be one of many reasons why they expect you, okay, bhai, bring your domain name here first. Doesn't matter where you bought it from, you can transfer it over or buy it from Cloudflare. Only then do we allow you to do DDoS prevention. Then all you have to do is, whenever you're setting the DNS records, right? Let's say you add a record for whatever chess.10kdevs.com, and it's for an EC2 server that exists on this IP. You can proxy it via Cloudflare and save the record. If you proxy it, it will handle DDoS prevention for you, protection for you. Doesn't matter if it's a front end or a back end. All requests will be proxied via Cloudflare, and they will basically, a bunch of times you will see your users will see pages like these, because it's trying to find out whether it's a legitimate request or not. Do we understand this? How can you prevent? How Cloudflare knows it's DDoS attack? Great question. They know, that's their job, right? To figure out ki, achha, these are the common IPs from which the requests happen. They have dunya bhar ka logic to figure out ki the traffic pattern here seems super weird. The requests are coming from a lot of bot farms, and then they prevent. That's their moat, right? That's what they've figured out. What does proxied mean? It means the request is going through Cloudflare. It is being proxied via Cloudflare. Even though I have said this chess.10kdevs.com should point here, it is not directly pointing here. It is getting proxied via Cloudflare over here. In fact, I would assume if I ping chess.10kdevs.com now, it gives me 172.67.172.221. The IP that it gives me is this. What was the IP that I put here? The IP that I put here was this. But my domain name is pointing to this. Why? Because it is being proxied via them. This is a Cloudflare IP most probably. If I open this, what happens? Yeah, as you can see, direct IP not. This is the Cloudflare page. So even though I put chess.10kdevs.com should point here, if I ping it, it is pointing to a Cloudflare server, which is eventually proxying it to this IP. If I did the same thing on Google Domains, if I go to Google Domains and if I select another domain of mine and select its TNS, you will see if I ping backend1.100xfs.com, it will directly point to this IP. If I ping backend1.100xfs.com, where does it point? 13.234, 13.234. But in Cloudflare, even though I gave it this IP, since I said it needs to be proxied, my domain points to some Cloudflare server, which eventually, after checking, is this request legitimate, proxies the request to whatever your underlying IP is. So that is how you prevent DDoS. Easiest way to prevent DDoS. Do it, forget about it. Most of your attacks are gone. If you're like, even for, an exchange, all we did was turn it on, forget about it. This gets super tricky during sneaker drops. Then you have to do 10 different things to make it better, have IP based limits, so on and so forth. But most websites, if you're creating a website, want to prevent DDoS, put it in front of Cloudflare, you're good to go. Last thing that's left is CAPTCHAs, guys. Okay, iske baad we're good to go. CAPTCHAs, I don't know, you've probably seen CAPTCHAs from me, like time to time, right? Let me see if there are any questions. I'm happy to take questions at the end also. So it's like a lot of people are saying, is Cloudflare a VPN? Cloudflare is a VPN. You could say that, is Cloudflare a VPN, a virtual private network? Not technically, right? It's a proxy. It's a server that is legitimizing whether it's requested right or not. A VPN is something you select. Okay, this is my machine, unless I'm missing something. If this is my Mac machine, and if I connect to a VPN, my request myself, I say, needs to go through a VPN, unless I'm missing something. Any request from my Mac, a lot of people are saying VPN here, is going to a VPN, and every request from my Mac is going to a VPN before it reaches somewhere else. That's what a VPN is, right? That's why I use VPNs. Oh, yeah, you also use them for office networks, things like these, I guess. Yeah, I don't think they're the same, but I could be wrong. No, probably not. VPNs and a Cloudflare proxy are different things, is what I would say. Let's see more questions. Some smart questions are coming in. Please share how you rate limit the sneaker wala use case. For that, you use WAF that someone has mentioned. You can add more restrictions by using a web application firewall. Let's see, it's somewhere here only. And adding a bunch of rules here based on IPs. A specific IP, let's say Iran, whatever country is that is not allowed to mint an NFT because cryptocurrencies are not banned there, whatever. You can add their IPs here. You can also do no conditions here, but block requests. Like you can block requests. Rate limiting. There you go. You can add rate limits based on IPs over here. Basically very similar to what we did. But so there's a very subtle difference between WAF, what we're seeing over here, web application firewall, and DDoS. DDoS is specifically for attacks. If there is a bot form attack happening to take your website down, is when you sort of do DDoS protection. WAF lets you do proper IP based rate limiting, basically very similar to what we did, but one layer before. If this is your application Node.js process, you can do rate limiting here, but wouldn't it be nice if you could do rate limiting one level before? That's what WAF lets you do. It lets you put like a certain IP should only be able to send 30 requests in every 10 seconds, things like these. What we were doing at the application level over here. Let's see what more questions are there. Say TikTok website is blocked. So it's an IP. That is something else. TikTok website being banned is something that DNSs in India are saying, this, you can say it's an IP based ban, but not probably by TikTok as well. TikTok has done it, but at the same time, DNSs will make sure that the government is probably telling all DNS registrar, if someone tries to go to tiktok.com, basically if I try to ping tiktok.com, I don't know if it will resolve. So I think that happens on the DNS registrar level only. Ping dot blocking dot dummy. Yeah, I'm sure they do it as well. Like TikTok themselves says, if a request is coming from India, we'll block it. But at the same time, that happens at the domain name level as well. I'm looking at Q&A for people asking where to ask questions. Why CAPTCHA? Someone asked something. Why CAPTCHA don't work for DDoS? CAPTCHA does work for DDoS, sort of. The thing is, CAPTCHA is used or / needed when your request reaches, if this is Cloudflare and this is your server, CAPTCHAs are needed when the request has reached over here and you are trying to legitimize, was this request sent by a user? Was that a bot or was that a user? What does a CAPTCHA let you do? It tries its best to make sure you are not a robot. It gives you a bunch of challenges, right? It makes you click or tick. If it feels like something fishy is happening, it will make you select a few options. So the goal of a CAPTCHA is to make sure you're a human. Okay, the request isn't coming out from some terminal attack.ts script. So it's not related to a lot of requests coming out. It is more related to, is it coming from a human or is it coming from a bot? Of course, the reason you might want to send requests via bot is to, send a lot of requests together. But the goal of a CAPTCHA is to make sure that after the request has reached here, after the request has reached the server, had this person done a CAPTCHA check? Did they click on a bunch of images and selected this is a road or not? That's the difference between CAPTCHA, or when you want to do CAPTCHA versus when you want to do DDoS protection. In a very big event, you will do everything. You will do CAPTCHA as well. If a sneaker drop is what is happening, then you will make sure wherever the browser is, and then there is a button that says buy sneaker, and same for an NFT drop that is happening. You will try wherever this mint NFT button is or buy sneaker button is, you have some sort of a CAPTCHA right above it that the user has to solve, so that we know this was a legitimate user and not this request came from a browser and a person solving a challenge and reaching our server, rather than it directly coming from some Node.js process. You cannot solve a CAPTCHA in a Node.js process. At least you try your best, or whoever is creating CAPTCHAs is trying their best. It cannot be automatically done by a Node.js process. A browser needs to be open. Someone needs to click a few places, and only then the CAPTCHA is considered to be succeeded. Let's quickly discuss CAPTCHAs, then we'll do questions. Not too difficult to add CAPTCHAs. There are a lot of free services that let you add it. The best place you want to put a CAPTCHA is, again, endpoints where you want to make sure a human is behind it, which probably means, endpoints that need to be very heavily rate limited. I wouldn't put it, on the reset password endpoint, but a lot of times you will see it if you go to Binance. A lot of times you'll see it on sign-in endpoints for an exchange. Whenever you open an exchange and you try to sign in, they make sure let's solve this specific CAPTCHA. What is another good use case of putting in CAPTCHA? Any process that you want to make sure there is a human on the other side. So you'll see it in forms from time to time. Basically, if I go to my admin dashboard, where I upload courses, things like these, basically something like this. If I go to this, you'll see there's a CAPTCHA over here, because this also they want only a teacher to access, and not some random guy to send a lot of requests here. That's another good example. Cool. How do you add CAPTCHAs? There are a bunch of ways. Google has its own company that it bought a while back. Cloudflare lets you do CAPTCHAs. So, feel free to pick and choose which one you want. Most of them are free, if I'm not wrong. And the way to add them is, if you go to the slides really quickly, Cloudflare has this offering called Turnstile. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've never pronounced it. I've just used it. That pretty much lets you do CAPTCHAs. So if I go back to my Cloudflare dashboard, you will see amongst the many offerings that it has a offering called, I don't know how to pronounce this, probably Turnstile or Turnstile, I don't know, where you can add a site. This is the site where I want to introduce CAPTCHAs. They have again written the logic to, show such a box, give you challenges in case they feel something is wrong, make you select a bridge, a motorcycle, things like these. So you don't have to write it. You can simply integrate it in your website. How? Fairly simple. You add a website here, give it a name, whatever, let's say chess prod, and give it the domains. Let's say I'm going to host it on localhost for now, but eventually you might host it on whatever, chess.com or whatever your website is. So you should add it here. It does verify whether or not the domain that you're adding is correct. And then it'll give you a site key and a site secret. Realistically, how do you think this should happen? And basically what needs to happen? Whenever a user is on your browser, on your website, and they're trying to do something challenging where you want to make sure it's a human, they will solve a challenge, and then Cloudflare will give you a token on this front end. They will solve a challenge. They will select a bunch of bunnies from a bunch of images, and if they have succeeded, Cloudflare will create a token. And whenever you're sending the backend request to your server, you can send the token along with whatever your form data is. Let's say I want to buy a sneaker number 22 for whatever rupees 10,000, so on and so forth. Along with the other things you're sending, you send this token, and then on your backend you verify with Cloudflare, is this token correct? Was this token generated by you on a front-end challenge? And did this challenge succeed? And if Cloudflare tells you, yes, you're good to go, is when you can, actually buy the sneaker for the user. Do we understand this? This seems right. If, you want to solve a challenge by Cloudflare, basically when you solve the challenge, you are talking to a bunch of Cloudflare workers. And then this guy decides whether or not you've succeeded in the challenge. If you have, then with all the data that you're sending, send the token along. It's a Cloudflare token. And then your server first checks with Cloudflare, is this token right? And then if it is, then you buy the sneaker. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And if this is straightforward, then writing the code is also pretty straightforward. Very straightforward. Slowly going down. But okay. Let's write the code. That might make it slightly easier to understand. The one basic thing that needs to happen here is you need to have some front-end code. The whole point of a CAPTCHA is it runs inside a browser and not inside some attacker server service in Node.js. So you need to create a website. The first thing you have to do is create a simple React.js website. Let's quickly do that. I think we've done it many times, so not too difficult to do this. Let me just quickly create it, and feel free to try it in your own time as well. Or if you want to follow along. I'll go slow only. Let me open Visual Studio Code. I have added a third folder here along with attack and backend called React. And here is where I'll be adding my React code, which means my front end code with the CAPTCHA. The backend remains the same. Let's say I'm trying to still protect the same, reset password endpoint. I'm trying to add a CAPTCHA over there. This needs to be hit by a human only. Source/app.tsx. Let me go to React, do an npm install, get rid of all the code here, and then add a bunch of logic that adds a few input boxes. Usually whenever you're seeing a CAPTCHA, not necessarily you need an input box. Like a lot of times it happens on sign up. A lot of times it might happen on places where there are no input boxes. For us, it happens on a page where we have two input boxes. One input box for the user to put their OTP, and then one input for the user to put their, what's the other thing? New password. There you go. Something like this. And then a button that they click on to send a request to the backend. Update password. On click, you send a axios.post localhost 3000 / whatever reset password with the right inputs, which include the email. At least for now, I'm hard coding this. Of course, this should be different in production. Let me also do all of this code is in the slides, by the way, so you can just copy it from there. Send a request here with the email, whatever the OTP, but most importantly, a token. The user needs to see a challenge, solve the challenge, and we'll get a token. That token we need to put here. And what do we have right now? I went to Cloudflare and I created a site key and a site secret. Now I need to use this site key somehow, and on the front end, create a challenge for the user. How do you do it? There are many ways of doing it. You can do it raw also. A bunch of people have created React libraries that make it slightly easier to do it. Feel free to pick and choose whatever you want to do. You'll find Cloudflare docs that show how to do it, without using a library like this, or you can use a library like React Turnstile that pretty much, encapsulates a lot of that logic for you. I'm just going to use the library. You get the idea. It's fairly simple from here. Let's quickly do it once just to make sure we're good to go, and then let's do questions. Some interesting questions today. So import Turnstile from this external library, and then all you have to do is put that wherever you want the user to see the challenge. Let's say I want the user to see the challenge here, and put your public site key over here. Site key is public. Site secret is something you need to keep on your server and save. Site key can be public, so I can just put whatever site key I have here over here. And one last thing is, when the user is able to do the challenges, you have to get the token that you can eventually send to the backend. So set token. If the challenge actually succeeds, Cloudflare will return you a token over here that you can store in state. And then just pass into the backend along with the other things that you're sending. That's all that you have to do on the front end. Let's see how the front end looks like after this. npm run dev. If I go here, as you can see, the front end has something like this. Right now it feels I'm a legitimate user. It did not make me go through a bunch of challenges. But if it felt like this seems a little shady, this IP is a little weird, this doesn't feel like a browser, it would have made me solve a bunch of challenges like select whatever, select horses in these 9 images, things like these. Given we have this, ideally you should have logic to have the OTP in state, new password in state. I'm not doing any of that. When you click on update password, a request will go out to the backend, and the backend needs to verify the token. If you look at it, let me just render the token over here. The front end has given me this very long token. Whenever the challenge succeeds, this token comes out. I send this token to the backend. Question is, how does the backend verify? And the answer is, you just ask Cloudflare, is this token right or not? So let's say this is the endpoint that I was trying to protect. Here I will write some logic. Okay, bhai, along with all these things, I also want a token from the user. And then here I will do a axios.get or post, whatever that endpoint is. Let's see, you can find them in Cloudflare docs. You can also find them here in the slides. There you go. Challenges.cloudflare.com/turnstile/v0/site verify. So this is where you have to send a request with the token that you just got. And you have to put your secret over here. The front end gave you two things, right? Whenever you created a site, it gave you a site key. It also gave you a site secret, so that you are the one who can verify this token. So you have to hard code this token somewhere in your code. Or like not hard code it, like put it in an environment variable. You get the idea. And then you can ask Cloudflare, is this correct? Challenges.cloudflare.com/turnstile/v0/site verify. You send them a token and ask them, is this right? And if you look at the result over here, it'll pretty much return you, true or false based on whether or not this is a legitimate challenge that was solved by the user. So what have we done? Whenever the user is opening the page, we are making them solve a challenge. Depending on how legitimate Cloudflare feels their browser is, they might have to solve a challenge, or it will just tell them, you're good to go. If their site seems legitimate, if the browser seems legitimate to Cloudflare, is when it will set the token, and then you can pass that token over to the backend on your extremely protected route that you have, and verify over here कि हाँ भाई, this specific endpoint or this specific request came from a legitimate user because the token that they have sent, we were able to verify with Cloudflare directly. Let's see what response we get back in the result over here. So if I rerun this, reset dash password, looks right. Let's start the backend as well. tsc-b node this/index.js. If I click on update password, a request goes out with a CORS error. Let me quickly add CORS to the backend. npmi CORS app.use CORS npmi. All these steps are in the slides if you want to do it yourself. I'm just quickly doing it so we have some time for questions. npm run dev, tsc-b node this/index.js. Let's try that one more time. Refresh the page. Challenge is solved. You should also disable the button until the challenge is actually solved, until the token is actually available. Click here. Returns a 400 bad request. Email, OTP, password are required. But more importantly, what was the response that we got back from Cloudflare? .json. Let me await result.json to actually see the JSON data that we get back from Cloudflare. Rerun the backend, and then if I send the refresh and send the request, you will see it says success true, which means this was a legitimate challenge that the user solved. The token that the front end gave to the backend is correct. These tokens can only be validated once. If I send the same request again with the same token, now it will be like, sorry, duplicate, timeout or duplicate this specific token has either timed out because the token is only valid for some 300 seconds, something like that, or this is a duplicate. You have already verified this token. If I refresh and now click on update password, is when is the request not going out. Refresh, network update password, request went out. Nothing got logged though this time. Why? Refresh, update, sent no token, update, success true. If I refresh, you get the idea. Now this specific endpoint can only be hit by humans, at least theoretically. Can you break CAPTCHAs? You might be able to put an AI over here, put a robot over here, whatever. But pretty foolproof on most cases. A CAPTCHA is extremely hard to break and extremely hard to programmatically create. It will be very hard for you to create, an attack a file like this where you can, spoof the token somehow and, put some random token here. That's how you ensure it's being hit by a human. Again, this doesn't have too much to do with DDoS protection. This has more to do with, is the request being sent by a human, or is this being sent by a process? Is this being automated by some Node.js process, Golang process? Because the browser or Cloudflare in this case is making sure, okay, is this a browser? Okay, it feels like a browser environment. Is this a user? Feels like it's a legitimate user. Is this not a legitimate user? Then it will make you select a few boxes and go from there, and only then will it issue you a token. Cool. Do we understand CAPTCHAs and how you can add them to sensitive endpoints? And if we do, then we're good to go, and happy to take questions after. I think we're done with the slides also. Alrighty. Fair. 93% is great. Let's open chat. Okay. Too many questions. Let's start from the bottom. How are OTPs actually generated in companies? Because I'm guessing the math function might not be the best way. Yes. So there are a few ways. math function is also decent. If you randomize it, you store it. The problem with the math function is you have to store it in a database, and which is also fine, right? So the problem with a math function that like we did right now is, which also is fine. There's nothing wrong in it. The only problem is when the first endpoint gets hit, you store this somewhere in a DB. You store this somewhere in a DB, that specific OTP, and then when the second request comes, you verify it from the DB as well. This, which is fine. Storing in a DB is not a problem, which means random number generation is fine. But usually what happens is you use an authenticator protocol to avoid hitting the DB. Harkirat, what is an authenticator protocol? I mean, ये तो मैंने word वैसे invite कर दिया. But have you guys seen this? Have you guys seen this Google Authenticator application? Something like this. Have you ever wondered how it works? Do you guys know what it is? Firstly, basically, what it is ke, it's another way to do 2FA without sending OTP to anyone, without sending OTP via email. I basically set this up once. I go to, let's say Braintrust is a website that I used to use. I have an OTP that's being generated every 30 seconds for Braintrust. Whenever I sign up, I just use this OTP over there, which right now is 444609. How many of you have used authenticators? If you guys know them, then it's slightly easier to explain how authenticators work, and then another way to generate OTPs. But authenticators. Okay, most people know authenticators. Great. So some people do, some people don't. Basically, what happens is, when you sign up on a website that needs to issue a lot of OTPs, they say कि यार ये scan कर लो, scan this password once, and that password gets stored in this authenticator app of mine. So this app has a password, and the current OTP for Harkirat is that password plus the current time divided by 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, my password changes. My OTP changes, and my OTP is a function of some password that I got initially from Braintrust plus the current time. And the Braintrust server, this is the Braintrust server, which is the website, whose OTP is being refreshed here. The Braintrust server also has it doesn't necessarily have my password in the database. It has a single password somewhere in memory. Yeah, this is our auth_password, whatever, some secret that no one knows. And it says कि यार Harkirat को जो हमने password दिया है ना, the password that Harkirat has is going to be auth password plus Harkirat's IP, let's say, Harkirat's ID, which let's say my ID is 3 in their database. So they have this in memory, and they know Harkirat's password is auth password plus 3. So whenever I ask them for an OTP, right? Whenever I say, hey, what's my OTP? They are like, arey, let's say they don't give me this. They don't give me this password. Braintrust doesn't have any concept of authenticators. But what they do is, they create an OTP based on their in-memory password plus the ID of whoever is asking, plus let's say the endpoint that they're trying to ask on, reset_password, plus the current time divided by 30 or whatever, 60 if they want a longer expiry. That way you have a in-memory OTP created. You don't have to store it anywhere. And whenever the second request comes, this is for the first request, it returns the user an OTP, which is a function of some password that they have, plus my ID in the database, plus the route that I'm trying to hit, plus the current time. I get back an OTP, let's say 339000. And then whenever I hit the second, I get this on email. And then whenever I hit the second endpoint, again, they do verifications using the current auth password plus 3 plus reset password plus time. So they don't have to hit the database. This is just long story short. This is another way of doing OTPs if you want to prevent storing them in the database, which is generate an OTP based on a function that takes some string as an input, which could be, a password plus the ID of a user plus the route that they're trying to hit plus the current time. And that is why you might see sometimes when you ask for an OTP, you get some OTP on your phone. Then you re-ask, you get the same OTP sometimes. ये कैसे होता है? How do you get the same OTP? That happens when you're using time as a function to generate the OTP for the user. Why do you do it? 2 reasons. One, if you ever want to give them authenticator, then you have to do it. As you saw, the authenticator app is generating a new OTP for me every 30 seconds. How is it doing it? Because it knows this password. It knows this thing right here, very long thing for me. for specifically Harkirat, it knows this, it has it here, it adds it to the current time and generates an OTP for me every 30 seconds. Whenever I have to hit them, let's say GitHub, I have authenticator turn on GitHub, on Gmail, everywhere. So whenever I hit them, I send them an OTP and they're like, acha, ye to Harkirat hai. This is the password we gave to Harkirat. Plus, acha, this is the current time. So they're also able to generate the same OTP that my authenticator app has. They match both of them and go from there. This is a long story short of sharing how you create, if you ever want to add 2FA in your website using something like this, authenticator, this is how you add it. Cool. Chat again. First question took very long time. Akash has a bunch of questions. Cloudflare is a front end in DDoS and API calls backend. How does that work? No, both. I can put a front end, I can proxy a request to my front end. I can also proxy a request to my backend, right? Whenever I'm going to Cloudflare, whenever I'm creating, whatever a DNS entry, if the DNS entry is for an EC2 server which hosts my backend, it will proxy all the requests via Cloudflare for that backend as well. So, if I go here and create a new DNS record for backend.nkdevs.com for some certain IP, 1.2.3.4, whatever, you get the idea. If this is a backend server, it's still being proxied, it will still do DDoS protection for me. Is it possible to write a script to change IP via VPN continuously to brute force OTPs? It's very hard, if not impossible, to do what you're trying to do. I guess what you're trying to do is you're trying to spoof your IP without changing your machine. Is that what you're trying? Yeah, so you have access to thousands of machines and that's the only easy way to do DDoS. What you are trying, can I spoof my IP somehow? If it is possible, it is very difficult. I would argue it's very hard to spoof your IP when you're trying to send a request. And if there is a way, I don't know the way. If there is a way, you let me know. Can you give a rough idea of how DDoS is prevented by proxy servers? So most probably, the thing that it checks for is, you can actually see a bunch of this here. If you go to security DDoS, you can actually override a bunch of their rules. So when you override them, they'll show you, what kind of attack are you trying to prevent? So if you go here and try to override some sort of a rule, block high sensitivity rules, browse rules, it'll show you, if an HTTP request is coming from a known botnet, then should it be blocked? Yes, this is the rule I want. Whatever are the common attacks that usually happen, right? They know them. They understand those network patterns. They have that's their mode. They've understood them over years. And then that's what they keep track of. There is a botnet over here. There's a botnet over here. There are a lot of simulated requests that come from these IPs. So they know whenever a bunch of requests are coming from a certain region, they're like, acha, there is a DDoS happening. Prevent, stop. So yeah, that's how they've figured this out over the years. Shouldn't we do OTP always greater than 999? Shouldn't we do? Yeah, you can do that. You can do 999. OTP will always greater than 9. That is correct. How to modify and apply better rate limiting over here? Must be basic wallet setup. Just what's your question? 300 requests per 15 minutes is too less. Seems like it is less for a single IP. Yes, I would say increase it a little bit. But keep it strict for some endpoints, like the OTP endpoints. What if front-end developer mistakenly does infinite requests in the backend in a use effect? Then the user will get blocked. If front-end developer does a mistake, sends infinite requests, then either your server is getting choked, as too many people are using this, or the user will have a bad experience. They'll get blocked, which they should. They should get blocked if they're sending infinite requests. It's the mistake of a front-end developer, right? Why can't we open a network tab on Harkirat, and how did you implement that? I did not implement that, but you can always override on click on the hook. Harkirat.con.in. You can always capture and prevent whatever happens by default. So I'm sure there's some code that they've written that looks something like this. Window.mouse.on right click equal to E, like something like this, not exactly this, but you get the idea. E.prevent default. Google it. Very simple way to, on my website, I want to prevent right clicks, but it does nothing. As you saw, I can still do it. Can you explain this line? Records are something we covered in detail in TypeScript Advanced. Let me go and show you the exact slides. TypeScript, more TypeScript APIs. I think there is records here, but could be wrong. Let's see, partial read-only record. There you go. So just go through this, you'll understand it. In attack /source/index.js access request config, why you added await on line 28? So if I don't add an await over here, then this will no longer return promises. This will become a synchronous function, right? I have defined something. I have defined a config and I'm not awaiting on this. I am just sending this request. So what will p.push be? Try to implement it locally. You'll see this returns are undefined. Send request will now return an undefined. There is nothing being awaited. It's a synchronous function. It's simple, similar to doing, I can remove async from here basically. It's no longer an asynchronous function. You are not waiting for the request to go out here. And hence, here also you cannot await on something and you want to await on that request, which is why you can either do this, okay, return access.request, and then also you will get a promise here that you can await, or you can simply await it over here so that this function returns a promise that you can await over here. That is why you need to add await. If you don't add await, this becomes a synchronous function. This send request becomes a synchronous function. This returns undefined. So you're doing, promise.all undefined, an array of undefined, which there's nothing to wait on basically. Consider this situation. Valid OTP is 100,000. In the first request we breached OTP, correct? What's the question here? Is 10k devs is Cloudflare domain? What if we tried to proxy devs using Cloudflare? You can. I just have to move, from domains.google.com over to cloudflare.com, and only then can I do it. And I have a lot of domains now, so I'll have to migrate all of them one by one basically, all the DNS entries that I have over here, I will have to go to Cloudflare and add them one by one, which is why I'm just avoiding it. Also, no one's DDoSing us right now, guys. That will be a big day when that happens. What if 1,000 people are connected to a VPN and the VPN IP gets rate limited? That's screwed. That's what I said. If you're in a college and there's heavy rate limiting, then a lot of times, even though you are sending different requests from different hostel rooms, the public IP of them remains the same, which is your college IP. And then if the college IP gets blocked, no one is able to visit codeforces.com or whatever website that rate limited you. Quickly revise the CAPTCHA logic on the backend. So if you look at the backend CAPTCHA logic, it says, I have my normal logic. I have my normal logic to do everything. But before I do that, I will send a request to Cloudflare. Form data is another way to send data to the backend. You can send it in your body like we did, something like this, or you can send over form data. In this case, they expect form data in the backend, which is why we send the secret, which they only gave us. No one else knows the secret. Where did they give us this secret? They gave it to us when we created turns. When we created a new site or added a new site over here, let me delete it now because my secret was exposed. Or just rotate the secret, I guess. You got this secret. अरे यार ये भी सबको दिखा दिया. Delete. So let me quickly delete it because I will forget and then nothing will happen really. I think this service is free, but still, just. Yeah, I got this secret from them, right? I tell Cloudflare, ki, hey, I am Harkirat. This is a secret you gave me for my site, right? This is me. And this is a token that a user is telling me that you validated. Can you confirm you validated this token? This is Harkirat. You gave me the secret. This is how I prove this is Harkirat. And I'm giving you a token. Please tell me, have you validated this on one of my websites with this specific client ID or have you not? And then Cloudflare tells you, Gacha. Have you or have you not? Was this token verified or generated by Cloudflare or not? And then based on that, you get a success, true or false, and based on that you choose whether or not you want to allow the user. We haven't touched React query yet. Yes. Just message me on WhatsApp. to do this. There are a bunch of topics that you've given me. Happy to add this to the list of topics. Off topic, but start teaching us cross-check layout always fixed when you reshared. Before started teaching, just check cross-check layout. It always gets fixed when you reshared. Sounds good. Basically, before I start the class, I should reshare before I start the class. Makes sense? Cool. Let's proceed. Easy class. Nice. Is it possible to write a script? I answered that. Ragini has a Notion doc. Like how CAPTCHA work because browser to only understand HTML says JavaScript, or am I wrong here? What does that mean? How CAPTCHA works because browser only understands HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So browser only understands HTML. Well, technically not true, but okay. HTML only understand browser only understands HTML, CSS and JavaScript. What's your question? How does CAPTCHA work? What is CAPTCHA? You go to a page and you see something like this. You click on it. What might be the one thing that they check? Was there a mouse click? Was the mouse movement correct? Was the user slowly approaching this checkbox? That might be one thing they check to legitimize. Is this a user? If Cloudflare feels you are not a user, then what can it do? It'll open a challenge for you. It'll show you 9 boxes, ask you to check, the streets. You select 3 streets, you click on verify. The request goes out to the Cloudflare backend server. Cloudflare backend server is like, acha, seems like the person selected the right things. Tells you you're good to go and issues the token for you. So why is HTML, CSS, JavaScript like a restriction? Could you repeat the question? Notion doc. Timescale DB doesn't work with Prisma? No. You have to know. I mean, probably not. Yeah. There's no easy integration between Prisma and Timescale DB. You'll have to write raw queries, which should be fine, right? Please, can you try to release an offline video on Timescale DB? A really hard time implementing, but wasn't able to. Also, you're done with 0 to 1. I'm really lost how to learn and write code. Do you write the correct way? It's done complete companies. Since making projects of own, working on code is really different. How can I start going through how to find one? So if you're a little confused, just start with the ones that we have in the cohort. If you understand them, then I can recommend a few companies, but when I do that, everyone goes there. So just try to find one. There are a lot of companies who have this stack open sourced. I've named some of them pehle bhi. Just try to find them. That's the only advice. Right. Can you give okay, answer that. So far in my production based startup, we've only used JavaScript and jQuery, and they don't want to marry any framework. I'm anxious as I want to switch currently at 10 LPA, but most jobs require X years of experience in some framework like React. Apart from React, what else should I learn to be worthy of hyping jobs? Just get some on-paper experience in React. Yeah, and I would say when you're applying for a company, just tell them you worked in React. No, I don't know who uses jQuery or why someone would use jQuery today, but yeah, that'd be my advice. Just start coding yourself. A bunch of this logic, a bunch of React, and then whenever someone asks interview, just say I have X years of experience in React, even though you have it in jQuery. Can you give a rough idea of how? Okay, answer that. Why are you not starting for loop from? Yeah, you can start from. You get the idea. No reason, just missed it. But yeah, you can start it from 1000. If you know that the backend has at least starts from 1 lakh or whatever. SRH ने 200 मार दिए दिन 15 SRH इस DDoS को कैसे रोके? Also, the front end code in the slides, it's not there. Let me see. I think it's there. If you go to the slides, you will find the app.tsx code over. Oh, you're not wrong. App.tsx code is incorrect. Let me quickly fix that. Before I forget. There you go. Fixed. All right. Topic question. how CAPTCHA work because browser. So okay, answer that. That's a good question, Shobit. Do they track mouse movement as well or only puzzle solving? I don't know. I would assume they, to figure out, oh, is this a human or not? They do track mouse movement, but I could be wrong on that. But won't WAF and DDoS come? Yeah. But won't DDoS come at the cost of performance, which is crucial in case of crypto? No. What performance? Okay, there's an extra hop. That's fine. They're fast enough to figure that out. And if that happens, you can always turn it off. But turn it back on in a case of a big event. But no, there's no very high latency that come. And why is it कि crypto में होना ही चाहिए? Why is it that it needs to be really fast? I guess what you're trying to say is it needs to be really fast for some parts of crypto, and you can always not proxy them. But I would argue it's worth proxying everything. Answer that. Is it possible to write a script to change the I answer that? Cloudflare is for front end and and DDoS we call APIs backend. How does that work? Cloudflare is for front end, and in DDoS we call, so it's for both. Whenever you're doing DDoS protection, okay, I think this happened because I opened this page, but this isn't the only thing that DDoS Cloudflare does. You can also proxy backend servers. It will protect it in a similar fashion. And just because I have this screenshot here doesn't mean you can't protect backend routes using Cloudflare from DDoS. Hello, Bhaiya. I have added Storybook to CMS. Oh, nice. Very nice. Very nice. Let's see. Very good. This is beautiful. This is very nice. This will make front-end development so much easier because now we can just ask people to do it, create components and then eventually integrate them. I will have to review, but this will deserves a bounty तो तुम ले जाओ. कितनी करें? 60 तो बनती है भाई. Okay, let me answer questions first. I will do reviews after this. Let's answer some more questions, then I'll do reviews. So far in my prod startup, we've only used, okay, answer that, but won't, okay, answer that. Why are we not, okay, answer that. Is it possible to answer that? All right. This someone do figure out and tell me. I don't think there's an easy way to spoof your IP address on the internet, but I could be wrong. So, if I had to guess, I would say no. There is no easy way to spoof your IP address and try DDoS without having machines. क्या हो गया? $60 equal to? Any Web2 companies hiring right now? Web2 companies hiring right now. I mean, मेरे को ऐसे तो नहीं पता from the top of my head, but let me think. Depends on your salary range, I guess. क्या मतलब तुम्हारी वो expectations क्या है? But for humble expectations, and I have a few companies of my friends, just ping Rookie and reach me, and then I'm happy to connect you. एक और भी है internship sort of with some person, but that's 35,000 rupees a month. So if you are okay with that, then ping Rookie, I'll connect you. Does backend know the IP of the user when the request is being proxied via Cloudflare? Does the backend know the? That is a good question. That is a very good question. I would assume yes, but we will have to check, right? We can write the code and log the IP of the user. I would assume yes. I would assume that Cloudflare doesn't obfuscate the IP of the user, but I could be wrong. So don't quote me on this. Try this out. Create a server, deploy it in production, log the IP of the user there, proxy it via Cloudflare, and see the IP. I would assume the IP remains the same. Someone attacked our multi-factor authenticator endpoint last week, and these were the steps DevOps and seniors took to prevent it. It's great to understand in detail. Shubham, could you elaborate? Someone attacked our multi-factor authentication endpoint last week, and these were the steps that DevOps and seniors took to prevent it. What were the steps? आपने उसके आगे तो कुछ लिखा ही नहीं. Can you add the steps? What if we don't opt with only numbers, can be numericals? Then if you make it less brute force, it's a choice between, UX and this. If you give a very big token, then no one can brute force it. But OTPs are a thing, because mobile pay you can only send. If you send a very long alphanumeric string on mobile, how will the person send it? Copy it and send it over. So yeah. Are all these standard ways to protect a website, or are there many other ways? No, these are standard. Like when you reach a very big scale is when DDoS will happen on you. Rate limiting is more for security, less for DDoS. And DDoS is, it will happen for you when you reach a certain scale, and yeah, then you need, basically you don't have to worry about this for a really long time, unless you have a lot of enemies or someone understands that you make money and then they want to attack you. Do you have any suggestion of website I created with the cohort knowledge? Cryptovoters.xyz. Click here to vote on the market direction today. ये क्या prediction market बनाई है? 187 भाई इतना तो नहीं चल रहा. What does this do? I can't see what it does. Is it just a UI? Oh no, okay, there is something more to it. Bullish, bearish, can't vote again. Got it. Seems like this is a prediction market. Something like Probo, you vote on both the sides, and then whichever side wins, money goes from here to there. Is this that? That's a good thing to build. Yeah. Okay, so that one of the CAPTCHA engineers said that they check the history of the user, previous website they visited, and also check the speed of the mouse. I wouldn't be surprised if they do this. That's how you do it, right? Without making them solve a challenge. How else would they know you're a human? Of course, they're tracking mouse or something like that. And what other languages browser understands? Oh, there's something called WebAssembly. So, you can run pretty much any language that can be converted to assembly inside your browser. So you can basically run C++ on a worker thread. Yeah, that's brief. If we use DDoS in backend, will it show in the response time? Slow down the response time. Someone else asked the same question. I would assume it's not significant, if at all. But yes, if you think about it, if you're proxying requests, if you're adding a server in the middle, of course there should be a latency, but I'm sure Cloudflare has solved this, and the latency is minimal, if at all. I remember in 2020, people used to attack their own website to fake their analytics and earn money from Google Sense. God, that sounds pretty ingenious. Later, Google policy became very strict, and now it blocks accounts. How does Google know the fake views are fake when it doesn't have access to the code? It doesn't have access to the code, but when you open a website on which a Google ad is running, it is able to run JavaScript on that website, right? So just how Cloudflare is able to figure out via mouse movement or some other way it's a legitimate user, I would assume Google does the same. If I create a website, harkiratwritesblogs.com, if I spin up a same problem with YouTube, right? If let's say I upload a video on YouTube and I start 100 machines and start visiting the same videos and clicking on the same video, through some traffic pattern it'll realize it's fake, right? How does it? Probably only the engineers at Google know. How would I do it? For something like this, if you're running standard ads on a website, like harkiratwritesblogs.com has a bunch of websites, if someone is trying to spoof, starting a bunch of browsers, IPs is the first thing. Are a lot of requests coming from the same IP? If that is not the case, the person has 100 machines, then mouse patterns, somehow figuring out if it's human or not, I think is a problem that Google has solved, and how they've solved it, I'm sure. How would I solve it? Why? Same. Just how you figure out if the person is legitimate on using a CAPTCHA is similar thing you would do. Track mouse movements, history, things like these. Does batching requests mean you're sending 100 requests to the server, but just one network request? Yes. If let's say I want to, good example of this is if you are in a, maybe not the best example based on the use cases we've built, like if you're in a game and if you're playing Counter-Strike and you move 2 steps ahead, it's a good idea to send both of these events together to the server, because if the events happen so closely, okay, I moved 1 step and then suddenly I moved 1 more step, two steps happen so quickly. It's a good idea to encapsulate them and send them together. Okay, like two steps happen. That's what batching is. Yes, you are saving a network request for whenever you're batching. You're sending 2-3 network requests ka data ek saath. Also, in the Paytm project videos, got to know that we can add a post install script in package.json to generate Prisma client. Yes, you can do that. Post installs are always good. Almost always in a Prisma project, you will see a post install with, npx Prisma generate. Oh, cool. I think that's done with all the questions. Let's do some code reviews, or are there more questions? I'll open it one more time, then let's do some code reviews, guys. Oh, a lot of questions. Notion doc. One CAPTCHA engineer. Lamba bhai. Can you please help me? All I need is guidance from you. 4.3 years of experience. Currently, I have 2 offers. One from a startup, the EV sector. I found it recently, received funding $6 million. And other is from a big MNC, General Insurance. I would be the only SG2 in the team of a startup. Above me, there are head of technology. MNC is also offering senior developer role, but there will be a proper team. Both companies are offering the same package. MNC is a 5-day hybrid work week, while the startup was 5.5-day work week. So the startup is full time on site, matlab? Working on the first day and the third Saturday. Acha, got it. Now I get what 5. But is this remote or not? Can you write that really quickly? I'll refresh. I don't care about the numbers of working days. As a screen developer, what would you choose and why? Very obviously, I would choose the EV startup that has recently raised $6 million. In Mac, unless I don't know what your big companies, but if you're big companies, a Razorpay or somewhere there are technical challenging problems, then probably. But if it's a Goldman or a JP Morgan versus a startup that has raised, I'd go with the startup. Learning ke liye basically, as you yourself mentioned, you'll be engineer number 2 there. The one upar ek hi hoga. So how much will you learn? How much responsibility will you have? 1 year of pressure is a lifetime of so much knowledge ke, you can do a lot with it after that. You can, if you become this engineer number 2 for a year, then itni responsibility ke basis pe you learn so much. You will not even attend any course classes. You will be under so much pressure if you are the engineer number 2. तो बस टाइम ही नहीं होगा कुछ भी करने का, which is the best way to learn. कि भाई it's a very aggressive environment. I'm engineer number 2. They just tell me to deploy this. I don't even know how to deploy on AWS. I'm figuring it out on the go. Is the best way to learn. You spend that 2 years under such an environment, you're a pretty solid engineer by the end of it. In the current company, I've only worked on MongoDB and I have production level exposure to SQL. Plus, I am more. I think the thing that you're worried about is I'm engineer number 2 there, which is a great thing, and which is why I would choose that company over chilling in an MNC. हाँ बस ये देख लेना कि if you're a slow learner, then MNCs are a little more stable compared to a remote job. But 6 million if they've raised recently, I think you'll be fine. That'd be my advice. Sir, can I ping Rookie for the internship? Please do. If you are okay with 35,000 rupees a month ka internship, please ping Rookie, and I will. And of course, if you're good, what is the best way for us to know if you're good? If you have made contributions to CMS, just or Daily Code or any website, just point them to us, and then happy to connect. How many classes are left in 0 to 1? Oh, 0 to 1 is done. It's just, we're letting folks in. But I think 30th April is when we'll do farewell for 0 to 1. Topic related questions. Implement PubSub from last class. Implement Q and PubSub from last class and had created a YouTube downloader Telegram bot. Nice. Let's see what you've done. YouTube video URL. Node.js Telegram bot. Add a URL to queue. Python worker picks it from the queue. Publishes an event. Video downloaded, which goes where? Video. Nice. So you post a video and it downloads it for you. Pretty good. And common place where you want to see an architecture like this. Yeah, Control-Shift-I works, right? So they haven't prevented that. If you go to, they've prevented right click, they haven't prevented Command-Shift-I or whatever. Yeah, I'm not surprised. But yeah, you can add them, but it doesn't do anything. Only, for rookie people, it's a distraction. You cannot right click. What if I want to communicate to a third-party service who wants my static IP to whitelist? I have a Cloudflare proxy in my web. How can I give my IP for whitelisting? What if I want to communicate to a third party service who wants my static IP to whitelist? Okay. I if I have Cloudflare proxy on my web, how can I? There is a third party service that your backend will hit. Your backend, while it's hitting them, is not going to proxy. Your users. This is your EC2 server. These are your users. When they hit you via Cloudflare. But when you hit the external party that you've given your whitelisted EC2 IP, which I'm assuming is what you're doing, you're running something here that needs, let's say, this is a Postgres server where you have IP whitelisted this specific EC2 server. There is no Cloudflare in the middle. So, whenever request goes from here to here, it comes from the EC2 server. So you should be fine. Gave an interview last Thursday from Metaverse company, eagerly waiting for the response. Should I reach out to HR about? No, don't. Wait. If they're going to do it, your pinging them is not going to help. Wait for 2 weeks and then reach back, or at least 10 days. I was logging in and poor UX was puzzled by if it's working or not. So I added this. CMS is the least priority right now. Chess, then daily code, then CMS. But what is it? Fixed sign-in validation error, improved the UX. What is the... Oh, okay, got it. Oh, this could be a phone number. Oh, so the thing is actually, this can actually be a phone number. You can also have phone number. You can actually have any string. And so basically you can have any string. Email field can be anything. And password, pip, 6 digits probably makes sense, but this isn't necessarily just email or phone. It can also be a username. So you'll have to fix. Basically, it doesn't make any sense to do validations on the first endpoint. The other one, Sargam, if he approved, I'm happy to just merge. Where did he approve this? Oh, he did approve this. Maybe he doesn't know. Okay. I don't know if that's true, but I think usernames can be anything, not just email. Let me confirm and then get back. Let me also just, request a review here so I know. Does AWS Shield? Yes, AWS Shield I think is the same thing as Cloudflare DDoS. I think it could be. Let me just Google. What does AWS Shield do? AWS. It's just a friend told me that they're using. I'm unsure if. Yeah, managed DDoS protection. There you go. So exactly. That's the same thing. Hey Kirat, I am from one of those cohort 1 who joined this cohort. I just wanted to ask, should I go for any intern, etc. like this? And if yes, how? Please reply. If you want to go for an internship, you should. Seems like you're in college then. And the best way to learn is through college. Topic related questions. Let's see. How will they track OTPs for multiple? How they track OTPs when we create multiple OTPs back to back? I'm assuming your question is okay. So I guess your question is, I went to the website, I said reset password, and then it generated an OTP, and I immediately sent another reset password. So they generated 2 OTPs. First your OTP was this, second OTP was this. If they're storing it in a database, the database now has 2 entries for OTPs. KR reset pass OTPs. For user ID 1, we have this OTP. For user ID 1, we have this OTP. This is valid for the next, whatever, until 20th March 2024, and so on and so forth. So you can just have 24. ये तुमने बाद में बनाया था, 21st March 2024. If you're storing it in database, then this. But a lot of times, as I said, you use authenticator logic, in which case you will most probably get back, not most probably, you will get back the same OTP only. If you use some hash-based password, which I explained a while back when I was going through, authenticator and signing up, then you will get the same password if you click on it twice, and you basically get the same thing again and again. All right, let's do one small one and then we'll call it. All right, small में इतना हो जाता है. मैं खोल देता हूँ वैसे. If you want to ask, feel free to ask. I think I've closed this a little too quickly. All right. How does DDoS attackers have so many machines to exploit? Great question. one, they have bought forms. They have bought this because this is a profitable business. Two, a lot of times malwares on various machines are used for it. So, if they will very silently put a malware on your machine, not do anything. But when they have to DDoS, they will use it. Sir, I don't know, DS, is it fine for this internship? Oh yeah, it should be fine. It's with the creator only. So I don't think it'll ask. As long as you can code good full stack stuff, you'll be fine. Bitcoin halving is over. Bitcoin फिर से गिर जाएगा. Also, is Binance banned in India? What if I use Binance now? I think they're getting an FIU license. So I think they're coming back to India. And to your first question, halving से कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Everything is priced in. Can we access .env variable by accessing the backend via console? Via console. What do you mean console? You can get the .env file if you SSH into a machine. If that is what you mean via console. I don't know what you mean when you say console. Why are we verifying the token in the backend when Cloudflare is verifying? And if the user is not bought, then it will not proceed. Why are we verifying the token? Achha. Let's say I go to the website. This is the website. This code is running on which machine? Harkirat's machine. On Harkirat's machine, token validation is happening, right? What if it failed? If it failed, Harkirat can still send the request, right? Reset password with, this is the new password for this email. Harkirat ye bhej dega. I need to make sure that the user had cleared the challenge. They had passed the challenge. And hence I need कि यार ये token मुझे साथ में भेजो. Send this token along so I can ask Cloudflare, is this token valid? And Cloudflare will tell me, हाँ हमने verify किया था. This was verified. And then I will reset the password for the user. If you do it only on the front end, even if it fails, user can still send this request, right? User can go to Postman and send this request, right? User can always send this request even with this failing. मेरे button block करने से कुछ नहीं होगा. If there is a sign up button here that I just block until the challenge is passed, the user can just inspect element and unblock it and click on it, right? Or go to Postman and send this request. You need to make sure the token that was generated is sent along with this request so that whenever I'm verifying, I verify the token as well. All right. One more PR. Does React Native just use Expo? Yes. I mean, at least that's what I asked. I don't know if that's what the guy is building, but most probably yes. So I don't. Okay, cool. Okay, that's it with the questions. Let's look at the first PR. Added Algolia for search. Fucking love it. Very nice. Font, daily code. Beautiful. Beautiful. This will just be expensive because Algolia is not open source from what I know. And probably not too expensive. Worth trying out at the very least. Some PRs I loved is this one, and these understand priorities. Algolia search is something we needed. Storybook is something we needed, and this person added it. Let's see. Search, and let's see what happens. Karo search bhai. SSR, static site generation. कुछ अंदर का search करो. I will review. I have never used Algolia. A friend worked here, which is why I know what the company does. Also, they're like probably one of the most famous companies to do search. I would love to look at their API. Let me request review here so I don't forget. ठीक है जी. Oh, seriously. Any other PR that someone wants me to review? यहाँ डाल दो so that I have them requested, and then I can prioritize yours when I start. Okay, a lot of them. Okay. This is one. This is one. This is one. We probably need to hire someone to do this, man. I don't think I can keep up with these many PRs. Okay, this and this. There we go. All right. Let's see. Added bookmark feature. ये तो था ना already. या नहीं था? Maybe not. But yeah, pretty good. I think मैंने बोला था नहीं शायद पहले backend में नहीं था. Okay, let's review this really quickly. This looks right. You want to find first. Prisma delete. if user bookmarks, please not going to delete where ये क्या है? delete endpoint है क्या? Post endpoint है. When you create one, first get if it, oh, this is for unselecting it, I guess. So one general pattern, or yeah, good thing to know is always explicitly call delete endpoint or post endpoint. Don't toggle, because front end might be inconsistent. The user might feel they're selecting bookmark, but backend पे शायद ना हो for whatever reason. So always explicitly call delete. User ने unselect किया तो delete, user ने select किया तो post. Don't toggle it in like a single post endpoint. Get bookmark status. This is for getting whether or not a single. Where is this used? Get bookmark status. In the bookmark component. What is the bookmark component? In track card. Oh, okay. So another big thing that you're doing very wrong is you're sending. So there is no single endpoint that gives you all your bookmarks, is there? No. So you're sending multiple requests. If I go to projects.100xdevs.com, you're sending one request for this guy, one request for this guy, one request for this guy. Achha, is this a bookmark? Is this a bookmark? That's what you're doing, right? Or am I wrong? Get bookmark status is what you're doing here in the bookmark component, which track card has a bookmark component. Yeah, basically you need to, I get why you're doing this, because there's probably no single way, like no easy way to. This is track card. There you go. So yeah, each card is rendering and then every card is sending a backend request, right? That's bad. You should have basically you don't have a endpoint, right? That gives you all the bookmarks that the user has. That's bad. You should have a single bulk endpoint. Have a single bulk endpoint that returns all the bookmarks. You probably have it. How does the bookmark how does this work then? Acha, get all bookmark tracks. There you go. You have this, right? Just use this. Yeah, there you go. You get all the bookmarks from here. Why did you use this in the other place as well? Don't send individual requests from each one of these bookmark card components, which is what I think you're doing. Maybe you're not doing that. Maybe I haven't read the code little enough. Are you sending multiple requests for each track card to get back the I should also end the recording to get back the bookmark? If yes, can you bulkify it? Okay, there are a few changes here. Let's move on to the next one. Add guest place support. This will be very hard if you've added this. Let's see. Let's see. User token name router.post/guest. This is it when the user wants to log in as a guest. Okay. You create a guest UUID, you create a user, and you create a token, sign in, return it to the user. Sounds good. But this doesn't exist in the database, right? This user token equal to this thing, name equal to whatever, that's fine. The question is, have you made, oh, you have made changes here. So let's see. What's up here? Okay, you added a player interface, ID, user ID, and name. Okay. Okay. That sounds right ish. Name equal to game player name. The point is game from the right player name. Huh. So I guess the question is else game to new game user ID game from DB. कहाँ से आया? Where is game from? Okay, there you go. Expand that. Game from DB. हाँ. Create game कहाँ है? Create game. If not this dot is guest game, तो यार ये है ना, still needs to be in DB. You probably need to create a new guests table. But this is not bad what you have, let's say. But you still persist this in the database, basically. We still need to persist this in the database, which will not be possible because database has a foreign key to a users table. We don't want to put... Yeah, that's why this is hard. We still need to persist this in the database, which means we probably need to remove the foreign key from the white player to the users table, or yeah, it still needs to be in the database. Can we create a... We probably cannot create two foreign keys, right? White player. क्या कर सकते हैं? Probably just create a new called guests. White can answer couldn't be no here. Can we somehow have an or? Probably cannot. On for game to we'll have to discuss the architecture a bit, dude. It's a good PR, but I don't know if... Yeah, it's just hard to figure out how do you persist in the database without removing the foreign key constraint on from game to user. So figure it out. So मैंने comment किया, and then tag me after you figure that out. Someone wrote some smart contract. Let's see what it is. Oh, it's in Solidity. It's for simple transfer transactions dot push transfer struct. What is this? Hard hat dot slash console dot sol. What is this? Add block to blockchain. Is it like creating your own blockchain on top of ETH? Is that what this is? Let's see. No readme. Let me bookmark this. And what is this? Okay, just for logging. Cool. And so this is done. This is done. Downloading notes works now. How is this? How did it not work with 2000 but works with 1000? That just sounds wrong. I don't think this will work in production unless you have already tried it on production. Let's see. Oh, you have tried it on production. Let's see. Okay. How does decreasing the timeout to download fix it? But ठीक है भाई. If it does, I will merge it. I will test this and then issue a bounty. Like you can still take a bounty. It's fine. won't be very, I mean, it's like you just change the timeout. It might have been hard for you to figure out. If you can explain me why this fixes it, then I'm happy to, talk a little bit more or increase the bounty. Why does this fix it? When your close is removed. Oh, you removed this as well. That makes sense. You don't close the window. We do need to close the window though after the thing downloads. Good enough. Feature autoplay and next video. This is very good. This is very good on CMS. Let's see. Fixed. अच्छा इसमें कुछ bug था क्या? नहीं feature. Let's see. Test video 1 for week 1. This is decent. We should change these buttons. They look so bad. The blue buttons. Let's see. Let me also stop the recording. Thank you everyone from the recording. Bye bye.